Cool. Are we live?
Oh yeah, sorry. We're
Is
live
is it
now.
is it does it say
We're
megabytes on the right? Rolling
yeah,
megabytes?
the clock is running,
The
but I think
clock's
I hit
running.
record like 4 seconds after
Oh,
you.
it doesn't
Is that
matter.
right?
No, no, I'll sync it all up.
All right, perfect.
That was just so it wasn't totally off.
The megabyte clock is running.
Is this a FlowPoint podcast? What is this? Is that what we're doing? Or are we just doing a Q&A Shreducation?
Well, it's called HO Shreducation Q&A session, and
Yeah.
I happen to be the first one. I think you and Will and Bob and we're gonna make everybody do it eventually.
Oh, okay. All
Yeah,
right.
I guess if I mean only if people enjoy it. If they don't enjoy it, we won't do it. But
How could they not enjoy this? This is going to be awesome.
I
Well,
don't know. I hope so.
we're not as awesome as
I'm
we think.
stoked. I'm stoked to do it. I think it's cool that we don't get to talk to customers all the time. We're up here making stuff quite often. So
Well,
anytime you get to explain stuff or answer questions they may have, I think it's super valuable. So it's a
I
cool opportunity.
I think what sucks is like you and I we'll talk to people on site at an event, but
Yeah,
that's like one or two or four people
yeah,
max, and you don't
yeah,
that's just a very microclimate of us getting to share kind of the knowledge base that we have. So this is cool format for sure. Let's get rolling. All right,
okay,
Dave Wingerter. This is Marcus Brown. We are kicking off HO Shreducation, I guess, question and answer session with the
yeah.
HOVP, Dave Wingerter. What's up, dude?
Not much. How are you?
Yeah, good. Finally got the technical difficulties figured out, and
Yeah, exactly.
we're ready to roll, man. Ready to roll. So
Yeah, so
talk.
let's just go down the list, huh? It
Well,
seems to me like.
just talk real
Oh,
quick about
sorry.
how
Go
this
ahead.
got started. How did this come about, and why are we doing this?
Well, I think myself and John Mommer and you have been speaking with John Horton and just wanted to kind of have a better connection with our customer base, especially to the Ball Spray Forum. And we get so many cool questions. We travel all over the world and educate people about water skis and talk to dealers and things like that. But it'd be great to talk directly to the end user. And there's a lot of new innovative product coming out, and people are like hungry for information. They like want to know like our thoughts on bindings or ski design or things like that. So just a great opportunity just to talk directly to them and to kind of have open discussion. The best we can.
Yep.
The thread is a cool way of like having open discussion. You pose questions, we answer. Hopefully, you pose more questions, and then the idea is every month maybe myself or Will, Asher, Bob LaPointe, Marcus Brown could answer some of these,
Yeah.
which is cool. Like technique questions probably should be for Marcus. Manufacturing ski design questions probably be for me. All the history of water skiing should be for Bob. I mean, that's what I would kind of
Yeah.
do if I was on the thread.
Yeah.
So
Awesome. Well, cool.
yeah,
Yeah, let's get started. So, thanks to John Horton and Ball Spray for making this happen for sure, for giving us a venue or a forum rather to be able to reach out to the folks who ride the stuff and want to know the answers to all these questions. Um,
yeah, for sure.
yeah. So, do you want to jump into this first one from J Pro about binding design? Um,
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean,
so,
I'll read it out loud just so people get
yep,
reference. That's probably a good
go for
idea.
it.
But it says J Pro says there seems to be a lot of back and forth with ballers about binding design. People have discussed toe height, release mechanism design, cuff height, buckle tension, etc. What are your thoughts on these things and the future of binding design at HO? So, yeah, Jay, that's a great question. This is something that HO we've been working on a lot. Definitely over the last 3 years since we introduced the Syndicate Hard Shell, and especially just personally myself, Will Asher, and a couple of the guys working on pretty heavily in the last couple months. So I can talk about all these things. Keep in mind, I'm not claiming to have all the answers. Like, I'm not saying I know exactly how water ski binding should be designed. However, something that we are good at is we do a lot of testing. I'm a mechanical engineer, so we kind of follow a scientific method, and we're pretty diligent about testing and testing properly. So we have addressed some of these things. So kind of the things I've learned are um, height off the ski, right? Or height of the toe in relation to the heel and things of that. So I know in my own experience, and this is echoed with Will, John Travers, Bob LaPointe, and Marcus, that unlike a running shoe, You do not want your heel elevated in relationship to the ball of your foot. So, most running shoes or athletic shoes or most inline skate shells, which, to be honest, everybody in the market is using, are designed to have the heel be elevated above the ball of the foot. And what that does negatively in water skiing is it puts you in kind of a, imagine you're in a tug of war with me, and I have the ability to kind of dig my heels into the ground, and you're wearing high heels. In essence, I'm going to pull you up out of position every time. And that's exactly what it feels like. In fact, a couple weeks ago, I did a test with a heel shim, which elevated the ball of the foot, the heel above the ball of the foot, and it's very difficult to ski. And you definitely move your center of mass backward, and you're all over the tail of the ski to compensate for that heel lift.
Yeah.
So I'd recommend you guys doing testing at home. That's not a good thing. We find that zero drop, or having the heel and ball of your foot on an equal plane, like both of them sitting on the ground or standing on the floor, is a much better position to be in. And I've actually never done the opposite, where you would start to raise the ball of the foot in comparison to the heel, or like in snow ski racing we call that gas pedal, essentially that position where the ball of your foot is up and the heel is down. There could be something to that, although that plays into a lot of like how much ankle flexion you have and things like that. If you have a lot of ankle flexion, like I'm fortunate I do, I could probably get away with skiing like that. However, maybe Marcus, who doesn't have as much ankle flexion, there's no way he could ski like that. That would kind of come to the physical range of motion of his ankle. So those are really the three scenarios. You've got your heel elevated, you have your heel and the ball of your foot on an equal plane, or like standing on the floor, which I highly recommend, or your ball of your foot elevated in relation to your heel, which in all honesty I haven't tested very much. So does that kind of, Marcus, speak to the first component of the design? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes good sense. I just anecdotally, I did ski with a heel lift in the front boot years ago based on my limited ankle range of motion, and it was probably the worst thing I've ever felt in my life. So I would recommend not ever having your heel higher than the ball of your foot.
Like typical water ski design, that's not super intuitive, right? You think, well, Marcus is telling me to move my center of mass forward, and we're all trying to stay forward on the ski. It makes a lot of sense to put a heel lift in to help kind of push you that way. But like water ski design and testing, you get out on the lake and you immediately be like, no, this isn't good. This is in a weird, vulnerable position. It's pushing everything forward, so then you're moving back with your chest and your center of mass, and you can immediately feel like not only is it uncomfortable, but it's going to hinder performance. So,
what about cuff height?
Well, I want to speak to the relationship between this and cuff. So, I think what they're alluding to in the question is, these are inline skate shells. They are designed to have the heel elevated, but we are using them in a way where the heel is not elevated. So when you drop the heel down to the floor or to the plate, in our case, some things happen. So the cuff is now, instead of being oriented vertically, is now, because the heel's dropped, oriented behind vertical. So that would be a negative. But the reason NHO selected this cuff is that our cuff can simply just shift forward to vertical, or in our case, even in front of vertical, without, like my friend Dino would say, pushing plastic. Meaning you can articulate the cuff to vertical or in front of vertical without it starting to run into the plastic lower or starting to have to push plastic to get there. If you're in a boot that you have to push plastic to get to vertical or get in front of vertical and into the typical slalom stance, that's a bad thing, because you need to be as easy as possible to get there. But the Syndicate shell was selected for that very reason, because even though we're using it not how it's intentionally designed, we're using it with the heel and the ball on the same plane, we can get to vertical or in front of vertical without pushing plastic. So I think that kind of hopefully answers some of the questions like, hey, these aren't designed to be used this way, why are you doing this way? And that's kind of the idea behind that.
Well, just to backtrack, I know this is off topic, but
sure.
You're talking about the adaptation of boots and equipment that's not meant for water with these inline skates, and we're all adapting them to water. Can you talk about? Do you want to talk real quick about the original hard shell system that you developed and kind of how unique that was, and that it was 100%
Yeah.
original engineering, like
Exosystem,
for
yeah.
water skiing?
Exosystem came out, I believe, in 2011. Maybe it's a 2011 model year. Looking back, I think it was quite ahead of its time. Obviously, in hindsight, I do some things differently. But overall, I think it was, a fairly successful program. It was from the ground up a water ski specific design. I don't know if people really realize that. The binding was designed from scratch. We definitely had help from a design firm out of Austria who had done some snow ski binding design for some of the major snow ski brands. The shells, we had all our own injection molded tooling for cuffs and shells, and we used an aluminum extruded bar. You got to remember back in that era, that was coming off of like the Jamie Beauchesne era. Will was just starting to really dominate pro skiing. Double boots were really, most of the guys were using them, and there were really two systems on the market. There was the good Velcro system and there was their Fogman system. I personally was skiing in the Fogman system at the time, so obviously I was kind of biased in that direction, but we really wanted to create a binding system where you had your feet together. We thought that was important, and we were trying, the goal of that project was never to really make a binding, believe it or not, for our pro level skiers to run 39. It was to design a hard shell water ski system for the masses. And I, coming from a snow ski background, kind of realized, hey, rubber boots are okay and lace-up boots are popular now. However, we all know the future of water skiing is in hard shell boots. And
Why?
my goal
Why?
was to,
Why? Let's get into the whys. Like I would say, number one, safety, because I'm reminded every step of my life that I've got a messed up ankle. What are your reasons why you think hard shells are the future of the sport?
yeah, I think the consistent release of the hard shell is what I like about it. And you can get that consistent release from a rubber boot. You can definitely get that consistent release from a lace-up boot, but you have to do certain things right. You know what I mean? In the lace-up boots, I think we all know if you pull the bungee lace too tight, it becomes static, and if the lace becomes static, then it doesn't release as well as it should. Same thing in a rubber boot. If the rubber overlay has enough stretch and it's not overly tight, rubber boots release very consistently, and they've been great for a number of years. But if you start to mess with those factors, that can be an issue. And having the fact that your foot doesn't come out of the boot, I think, is really the important part, because you can control the release with a tension setting, and you can control the tightness of the shell for a fit setting. And by decoupling those two, I think it's a better scenario. The difficult thing is it adds cost, and our boot retails for about $650, where you can get a nice pair of animal boots for $180 a boot. So it's really my engineering goal is to be creative enough and to drive the cost down to bring those in line. And Exo did that back then. You could buy an Exoform system for about the same cost as you could a pair of double animals, or potentially the Radar lace-up boots back in the day. I mean, they're called Vapors now, Strata boots or whatever they were called back then.
Yeah.
So,
What's your takeaway from that system? Moving forward.
well, I mean, I'm an engineer, so I think of all the things that really caused us issues. Like if I had to do it over, I probably wouldn't make the toe piece of the extruded rail plastic. Eventually we transitioned that to aluminum because we just had too many failures on that piece. The idea behind that was, if you get one of those weird shovel grabbing falls, which you rarely get, where essentially the shovel grabs water and pulls behind you, those are bad falls. In fact, John Travers had one of those just the other day he was telling me about. And that system had a fail-safe where that plastic tip piece would intentionally fail in that scenario to save you in that issue. And that piece cost like 3 cents. So we're like, hey, it's worth the risk. However, we did have a lot of those fail in the marketplace. So, and I get that, it caused a headache for our customer base. So, that's one thing I do different. Cuff height was quite low on that boot. Looking back, Will Asher was using a reflex boot at the time. He was cutting that cuff height down quite a bit. He was really pushing for low cuff heights. That's where he was at in his thinking. Him being our athlete at the time was pushing me in that direction. If I had to do it over again, I would not make the cuff height that low. I think we trended a little too low. personally, look, especially based on what we're doing now. So yeah, those are the things. But overall, I guess the third thing I learned is, you go to, I'm from Detroit, so you go to the Detroit Auto Show every year and they have all these beautiful concept cars. And you're like, why aren't the companies making these concept cars? I used to ask my dad that all the time. He's like, well, people think they're cool, but when they have to throw down $30,000 and buy them, they're a little uncomfortable. It's a little too far out there, potentially a little too innovative. And I think that is definitely the case with EXO. Yes, it had its shortcomings. It had its little blips on the radar. It had little things that didn't quite work out. But I think a lot of people were just scared. It was so radically different. It had features like it was a little higher off the ski, which is a big no-no in water skiing. Although in snow ski racing they cheat by trying to go higher, so it doesn't really make sense. But it had so many things about it that were just kind of out of the norm that it scared people off a little bit. I think if we re-released it today with a couple little tweaks, other than the double boot thing falling a little out of favor, it'd probably be more successful than it was in 2011. But that'd be interesting to do. Anyway,
Well,
we're way off topic, dude.
No, I know. Let's switch gears. Even though you have more to say on that.
Yeah.
I want to go down to North Idaho LPO. He wants to know about the sweet spot. He said, I've read a lot about it, but would love to hear from a ski engineer. Each ski is different, so how does one find the exact center to utilize all of it? He's 6'6", 215 with double XL bindings on a 69-inch. Does the skier's size diminish, minimize, or change the sweet spot? What do you think?
I think that's a good question. I mean, sweet spot is a marketing term, to be honest. As an engineer, there's no technical sweet spot, right? So I don't know exactly how to answer that, but I guess I know what he's getting at. It's like, how do you have consistent turns or consistent cuts, even though your body isn't always in the same position, right? And man, that's a tough question to answer because there's a lot of factors that contribute to that. I think one of the key elements would be just rocker, right? That seems pretty obvious. I've noticed a little bit with the skiers around me at Hilltop Ski Lake, where I ski here in Washington, that maybe as a more high-end skier, I can get away with a little bit more rocker under my feet. And especially at 36 miles an hour in short line skiing, maybe I need that because, a lot of times when the rope gets really short, we are staying connected all the way to the buoy. We're more or less kind of throwing our ski out there at the last minute. And then while we're in that kind of vulnerable extended position, we need that ski to come underneath us to catch us. It's kind of like we're falling in, but the ski's coming under and catching us. And I don't think that really happens at longer line lengths as much or slower speeds. So I've noticed that a lot of times when people are kind of hung out there in that vulnerable, extended one hand on the handle position, they need a more stable platform to stand on. And that's why you often see a flat spot under the front foot or potentially a flatter rockered section. If it's a continuous rocker, it probably it would be a flatter. And as you go up, in this case, to bigger sizes of skis, depending how they're scaled, that sweet spot or that flat spot or that near flat spot would start to get longer and longer. So if they're taller and they're a little bit more forward, hopefully they have that platform to balance on. So that's one component of it. Yeah, what were you saying?
I was going to say, how about, what are we doing at HO as far as ski design? And where have you evolved in the last 10 years in regards to the sweet spot, for the average skier?
Well, I mean, I think one thing what we've really tried to do at HO is, it sounds weird to say, but develop very numb fronts to our ski. Like, what I mean is the tip and shovel of the HO skis have been designed very systematically to be numb. And what I mean by that is to not bite, to not overreact, to not stop and get behind you, so that the skier can kind of try to achieve some of the things that actually Marcus taught us 15 years ago about moving your center mass forward. Marcus has told us for years, you got to move your center mass forward. You got to move it in the direction of where you want to go. And you definitely see the younger generation of skiers doing that, and that's what all the best skiers in the world are doing. But if you're trying to do that on a ski that is doesn't allow you to do that, meaning like if you get forward, it'll stop and bite on you if the bevels are too aggressive, if the rocker's too curved, and it's good luck, you know? So HO, we really do something different up there in the nose of our skis that allow you to have that kind of forward driving, center of mass shifting way of skiing. Now, that being said, we realize that not all of our customers actually ski that way, even though maybe they aspire to. So we still try and design in features that if you don't do that style of turn or cut, the ski still works very well. But I think that is a uniqueness, and I think that's a testament to our team, having a guy like Marcus, Will Asher, John Travers, Nick Adams, Bob LaPointe, myself, who are out there skiing every single day or nearly every day, that we're thinking like that and trying to give people the opportunity to use the ski in a more efficient way.
Yeah.
So hopefully that answers what you're getting at. Is that kind of what you're alluding to?
Yeah, I think that does for sure.
Yeah.
I'm
a big believer in that. Yeah. You gotta give people a path to how to improve, and you gotta give them the tool that allows them to do that. If you try and do those types of moves on a ski from the late '90s, I just don't think you're effectively gonna do it. You know.
Well, we've talked about this before. I don't know if this is the right venue for this conversation, but I mean, the short story is, and you can maybe speak to this, that for any individual, there could be a ski that if you get on it right away, you will run more buoys. However, you didn't change anything to run more buoys. So this is like a magic pill, right? And it's like a Band-Aid that covers all of your deficiencies as a water skier. So now, if I were to tell you, and you and I have talked about this, that you could have a ski that you could instantly run 3 more buoys on, but that the 3 more buoys you'd run that would be the limit. You would never run more than those 3 more buoys, right? So there's a ceiling. Here's a ski you can run more buoys on today, but there's going to be a ceiling. Or here's a ski that you're going to get on and it's going to feel different, and you're maybe not going to like it right away as far as being comfortable or whatever, but it will allow you to progress your technical skills as a skier. And in that sense, the future's in your hands. If you want to ride this other ski B, that allows you to become a better skier technically, the sky's the limit as far as what your potential is. Would you want to speak to that real quick? Because I feel like that's kind of part of our design ethos, and we've gotten hammered back for it because people want the quick fix, but they are short-sighted in that they don't see that what we're trying to hand them is maybe a more revolutionary tool that will allow them to move better and be a better skier.
Totally. We have tons of internal discussion on this, and I see both sides of it. I understand the Marcus's approach where you got to give them a tool that's going to give them something that's going to help them improve, but at the same time, I'm a tournament skier. You don't want to go out to the lake and be 6 buoys off every day too. So this is why we discuss so much, is like, how do we find the middle ground between these two? Or better yet, how do we create both of these at the same time? Is it possible to have a ski that makes you a better skier, that allows you to do moves that are more in line with efficiency and the things Mark has been talking about, but at the same time, you can go out there and get 3 more buoys than you could on your own ski? That's my challenge as a ski designer, along with engineers at HO and Bob and Will and everybody. So is it possible to do both? Yeah, I think so. I think Syndicate Pro does that pretty well. I've seen that. If I'm being very honest and transparent and looking backwards at some of our earlier skis, perhaps they were worked very well when you did the right things, but weren't known for being great when you were scrapping or late or things like that. I didn't intend to do that. That's just kind of where we were at in our design and our thinking and our understanding at the time. But I think Syndicate Pro, the new ski, takes some of the elements of the older A skis in terms of like when you do things right, they perform well. But also, you can go out there on your first or second or third attempt and scrap out 3 more buoys. And I think that's just learned lots of testing through the years. That's not something you can theoretically design. That's like experimental testing for a decade that's allowed us to get there. So, but yeah, very good point. Kind of high level design philosophy there, but important that maybe the people on the thread understand how much time and energy and how far down the rabbit hole we go on these things to try and build best product. And not everybody else is doing that, to be honest. So
Well, what's crazy is that if you look back over the last 10 years, I feel like HO's had a high amount of not new designs, but different designs
Well, new designs,
relative.
we've cut. I had to calculate this the other day. I've been here 12 years, but really in the last 10 years, I think we've designed and machined and produced 100 ski molds. So someone was talking about startup ski companies the other day, and they're like how they have a new company and they got a new just theory, and I was like, yeah, I get that because I had a startup ski company in 2006, believe it or not, and which was HO because we were a new crew. But since then we've cut 100 ski molds, and there's no replacement for that. The amount of learning and mistakes made and testing that comes out of making 100 ski molds and riding those skis is like irreplaceable. And that's kind of our competitive advantage now. And then you tack Bob onto that, Bob LaPointe. I mean, he probably cut 100 ski molds before that in his life. So you're talking hundreds and hundreds of ski molds now. And obviously the skis that come out of them. So I think that's definitely helping us. Our craft is fairly refined at this point. So, yeah.
Yeah. So talk about Bob. Horton asked. Bob LaPointe's a five-time world champ from another era, and you're an engineer with aerospace background. So when you guys started to work together, were there any unexpected revolutions, or can you share some ideas that he brought that you didn't expect, or vice versa?
Well, yeah. I mean, in all honesty, I can say this now. I mean, Bob taught me ski design. Like, you go to school to be a mechanical engineer, you work for a company like Lockheed Martin or something, you don't learn anything about water ski design, right? That just makes sense. Granted, I was a high-level tournament water skier, just like everybody on the thread, so I had a couple of things I thought I knew. But, I mean, realistically, I didn't know anything. And, Bob got involved with HO through Chris Parrish when Chris was skiing for us, and Bob came to the factory, and literally the first day he was there, he was down in the mold, and he was cutting out pieces of carbon by hand, and he was teaching me about pockets and patches and how to make skis stiffer, and that's where it all began. So everything I know about ski design was either learned from Bob originally or learned with Bob along the path to ski development. So I didn't really bring much to the table in the beginning. The first ski A1, I mean, he essentially made by hand. He's a craftsman, I think he's the best in the world at that, and he made that ski by hand with Bondo and carbon and just kind of like whittled it together, right? And then our job as engineers was to take that physical prototype and to turn it into reality. We did use our background there. We digitally scanned that first ski. We got a point cloud. The engineers went in there and started to look at this point cloud and connect the dots more or less, and started to quantify ski design, meaning, hey, this bevel works, and it's this shape, but can you break it up into 3 radii? Can you break it up into a size? What kind of radius you're going to use for your concave? What kind of radii are you going to use for your rocker line? And we put numbers to all that. And luckily that ski worked very well. So then when it came time to do future skis, we began to transition away from Bob like doing all the handwork and us looking at these like spreadsheets and numbers and designing more in the computer. So like for instance, the original A1 I still remember, has a 451,000th bevel size. And that is really the drag that you feel in the water. And the bigger the bevel is, typically it has a better offside turn. If it gets too big, sometimes it hurts the onside. So like I know later on when we wanted to try and make skis ride higher in the water, we would say, okay, well, instead of being at 451, let's try 430 and see what happens. And then, we tried 430 and maybe it was too much lift, so then we could go the other way. For instance, 66 Syndicate Pro has a 450 thou bevel in the front and a 460 bevel in the back. That's our new combination. But if it wasn't for Bob, we wouldn't even know the realm of that. You know what I mean? So, yeah, very unique relationship. I still talk to Bob like multiple times a week, and he's not doing as much handwork now, but he has the best eye in the world at sitting backwards in the boat and watching a recreational skier or a world champion skier ski and being like, yeah, it's a little slow under the line on the offside. I think we need to tweak the rocker. I think we need to soften the top edge. And then because of all of our data and our spreadsheets and having essentially quantified all those variables, he can either do the bevel work himself, test immediately at the lake, or I can go back into the engineering studio here with my team, make those modifications to a mold. We have our own CNC mills. We can cut new tools, and essentially within 2 weeks or something, we can have the exact same ski with that modification ready to go to our athletes to test. So it's really pretty unique thing within the industry to have all that housed in one spot, and I think that's what's allowed us to go quick and introduce a new high-end ski every year for the last 10 years, so.
Let's move on to a different one. Todd A asks more of a training question about if you get...
Todd's my buddy.
Yeah.
He skis with me at the lake, so he's helping me out here. I don't know about training, Marcus. That's your area
Says
of expertise.
like any other athlete, when skiers have a small slump in their performance, what's a recommendation for moving forward? Ski train more or less, change equipment, or see their physical therapist more often?
I wouldn't probably be water skiing or maybe walking very well if it wasn't for Todd. So he's been a huge help.
Yeah.
I don't know, Marcus. You should answer that.
No,
you're the coach.
I don't know. I think you have just as much insight. I mean, I would tend to think, it's different for each.
I'll take a crack. I'll take a crack at it. So, if you have a small slump in performance, I think it's inevitable. It happens to all of us. I mean, I hate to say it. I think it's fundamentals, right? So I don't golf much, but my dad's very into golf, and I've seen the golfers. And the thing about golf is you can see a guy is crushing it on the front nine, and you can literally see him start to fall apart on the back nine. It starts to go slow. It's like a little piece here or there, and by the end he's unraveled. That happens to us in water skiing. Obviously, it doesn't happen within the set. Usually it happens over a number of sets. You're like, had the best set of the year, and then 3-4 days later, you're just off. I think it's an attention to detail in the fundamentals. I think Michael Jordan said that or something close to that, You got to get back on the free throw line. You got to work on your shot. You got to get back to what works. Typically for us, like Wade Cox is like my coach when I was a kid, and he would probably bring it back to your gait. He'd say, hey, you got to own the gait. You got to have the timing right. You got to nail that thing. There's no excuse. There's no buoys. He'd be very critical. So you go back to the fundamentals, which is your cutting position, your downswing, I guess people call it now, your connection off the second wake, which is your upswing, and your gait timing. And probably if you address those things, whether you address them at easier line lengths or, dare I say, free skiing, right? Oh my God, it's okay. You can free ski. It's not a waste of time. That would probably what I do. I do that. I come from a snow ski racing background. It would be absurd to, if you were in a slump or beginning the year, start off in a giant slalom course, 60 gates. Be crazy. You do dry land and drills. You do free skiing, get timing. You kind of get your gait timing ahead of time, then you start to dabble into the course. We don't do that in water skiing. Personally, I think we should.
People take their real ski and they just jump right in first set of the year skiing the freaking buoys, right? I mean, most people.
And typically fall off at 1 or 2, 3 times. But, hey, I mean, that's not really the purpose of this thread, but I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah. Here's something else. Let's switch gears because I think you're right on. The only thing I'd add to that is I think it's specific to each skier in that specific slump. So let's say you haven't been sleeping, right? You've been working, traveling, and you're like, oh, my skiing's going down. Well, no shit. Let's start getting some more sleep and eating a little bit better and see if your skiing comes back. Or you've just been skiing 4 sets a day, and unless you're, on steroids or HGH, you probably shouldn't be skiing 4 or 5 sets a day. So I think it's just specific within the constraints or confines of what you've been doing leading up to that slump.
That was a better answer. That's why you should have taken it.
No. So here,
let's go to the next one.
Yeah, Wish asks, how do release dates play into the design process? Do you feel pressure to get something new out in time? What if the design's not ready? Would you consider skipping them all a year to perfect a design you're confident in?
That's a great question. Yes, I feel a lot of pressure to get skis done on time. In essence, I get paid to develop products on time and on budget. That's what I do for a living. I'm an engineer. Skis is one small portion of what I do. HO, I don't know if I should say this, but we're a big company. We're a small company in the grand scheme of things. We're a big company in the water sports, and we do about 50 million, 55 million sales revenue annually. And skis is, less than 5 million of that. So, and I have to, do a lot of other designs as well. So yes, I do feel a lot of pressure to get skis done in time. I'm feeling the pressure right now. HO's working on a new ski. We want to launch at the Water Ski Nationals. It's a pretty good one, but the $1 million question is literally, is it better than what we have, or is it better than the competition? And I stress every day of my life to make sure it is. Would I ever postpone a ski to make it better instead of releasing? Of course, yes, I have. I've done that many times. That's what I have to weigh every day. It's like, let me tell you one thing. Like, skis are never done being designed. Like, that's a weird thing to say. Never once have we been like, we're done. That's it. It's perfect. We're good. What typically happens is you get on it, you get a ski going, you get on it, there's a honeymoon phase, you're like, oh my God, this is it. Then reality strikes back in, you're not running 41, or in my case 39, because of technical deficiencies in your own skiing, perhaps, which you're trying to sometimes band-aid with ski design and things like that. So then you got to work through the tough stuff, and you definitely improve on that, and at a certain point, you got to make the decision, like, is it ready to go to market? Is it better than what we have? Is it better than the competitors have? Is it better? Is it ethically the right thing to do, bringing this thing to market? And so I have to do that, yeah. And I've made bold decisions and told my bosses and upper management, hey, we're just not ready. We're not there. We did that a lot with A1. A1 was supposed to come out a year earlier, and it didn't. And I got a lot of flack for it. I was a new engineer. I had promised them we were going to come out with this revolutionary ski, and I didn't deliver. But in that case, I think it worked out because we sold a bunch of them. But yeah, definitely. You got to do what's right. And the cool thing is we're skiers, and we have to participate in the sport. So if I make a poor decision, hey, my competitors and my other skiers, they let me know. They're like, dude, that ski was bad. What were you doing? Like, I have to live with that. So yeah, I definitely take that to heart and home, and try and just do my very best to bring the best skis to market every year. I don't know. Does that help answer that?
No, I think that's great. I mean, obviously there are constraints, and there's pressure to, confine our outcomes within the context of a consumer market, but we also are skiers, so we care, and we want that to be a good ski.
We are faced with the consequences of our decisions, both good and bad. You know what I mean? And so, but I can really say, looking back over the last 10 years, if I had to do anything different in that regard, I would do everything the same. Like, I think we really, not saying we always had the best ski on the market, but like I told Will and those guys early on, even if we don't have the best ski, I promise we're striving to create it. And best ski is a hard thing to know until you release them into the wild, and see how people like them. And so,
speaking of greatest hits, should we talk about the S2? We got a couple thread questions about it. You want me to read them off? What?
Sure. I didn't look at those yet.
JAS says, what happened to the step bottom that you used on the S2? Seems like you guys spent a bunch of time working on the innovation. P.S. I really like that ski. Also, Ski Heart says, I agree. Personally, the S2 is my favorite ski. I gained 5 buoys on it. Well loved by many, including a glowing review by Horton. I love the fact that it was 34 mile per hour ski. What made the ski so successful, and is the Omni a more modern version?
Those are great questions.
S2.
I can talk about the step bottom. I have a pretty good story about the step bottom.
All right.
So, Bob got involved with us. We had some really high-end skis that are rocking, A1s and A2s and things like that. We were traveling around, talking to dealers, talking to skiers. We kept hearing the same story. I used to ski, but it's too much work nowadays. I used to be really into skiing. I'm a little bit heavier than I used to be. It's just so much work. So we said, hey, I think there's a real opportunity if you can make a ripping ski, which we already have a really good ski, but you could somehow find a way to make it less physical effort. You make it more efficient, or how I say, more glide speed, right? So less drag. That's more lift, whatever you want to say. Those are all kind of the same things. there's a real opportunity there. For one, business opportunity, and two, to help skiing grow, right? Because that's really my job to grow participation in skiing. The rest will
Well,
take care
let's
of
face
itself.
it, it's your job,
So,
but you're also passionate as hell about it, and you do it
sure.
first and foremost because you love it, right? I mean,
Yeah, right. I still ski all the time, even though, Anyway, but long story short, Bob had the idea for Step Bottom. It was kind of modeled after offshore racing boats, and, they had quite large steps on that. And Marcus could probably explain it better than I, but essentially it reduces the wetted surface, so it has less drag. And Bob said, hey, that's a great concept, but the scale's off. We need like micro steps. And so we originally did that on a ski called the Coefficient X. And we went out and rode it, and we were amazed that it had a pretty significant effect on reducing drag. And we knew we were onto something, and we knew that was kind of the direction that HO was going to take for definitely our crossover skis and free ride skis, but potentially even for our tournament skis. And so that directly, Coefficient X, is where S2 was born. And it was targeted for 34 because obviously when you're going 34, you're going slower. And so we thought having less drag would be of benefit, and that's where that ski came from. Now the S2 was a totally different design in terms of width profiles and rockers and all that, but it did borrow that Step Bottom from the Coefficient X. It was a real popular ski. My vision of having 34 and 36 mile an hour skis didn't really pan out because Greg Bedell at the time was our top skier for 34. He ended up riding an A2 or A3, and myself and Terry Winter were riding S2s at 36, so it all kind of became jumbled in the marketing world. But the idea was good, having two high-end skis and having them feel distinctly different, and the S2 in particular was reducing the drag through the Step Bottom. Now, to the other point, why did the Step Bottom go away? Well, it went away because Marcus and I and Bob and a couple other people kind of created the clean edge design on the free ride, where essentially that typical bevel size of 450 thou decreases to virtually zero, and that typical like 7-degree outward sidewall wraps in more like a wakeboard edge or a trick ski edge, and that blew our minds in terms of drag reduction. So whatever drag reduction we found with steps was 10x when we went to clean edge, and we knew like this is something we can really hang our hat on. So that's when the slow transition from steps went to clean edge, and actually around that time speed skin as well, so the textured bottom. So the combination of clean edge with a little bit of texturing from speed skin outperformed the steps, and then that's when you see the coefficient go away and go to the CX and TXs, the S2 go away, eventually morph into VTX, which I think was another question there. Would you ever bring that clean edge design to tournament skis? Yeah, we have. VTX is a proper clean edge ski, and it's capable of running 41.
yeah,
So
yeah,
now,
And Horton asked kind of about speed skin. What does it do? How does it work? I think you kind of addressed that a little bit. Um,
yeah, I mean Horton. I have read that question. I don't have it in front of me, but he said something about the Dennis Conner Stars and Stripes riblet design. I believe was that the inspiration. No, but I think it's the same theory, or I don't know exactly their theory, so similar theories, I would say. Ours was very much more experimental testing. Bob would hand do these skis. He'd modify the bevels and cut them and do all this, and then we would paint them, spray paint them, in order to hide it, more or less, right? Because we're in R&D, and sometimes Will and these guys would be riding these in pro events. So we started to notice that depending on what spray paint he used, if he used like a gloss spray paint versus like a really matte finish barbecue, almost gritty spray paint, we could feel the difference. And we all were preferring, and it became this weird thing where Bob would be like, "Hey, dude, you got the barbecue black spray paint?" And we'd have to we'd be in Florida, we'd have to get that paint. We'd be in Seattle, we'd have to get that paint. And then eventually, we're just like, we looked at texturing the mold, but then if you texture molds, they wear out sooner. And I was like, why don't we just put the texture in the bottom? And over a year or two, we developed that. And what it does, some speculation, but I think it introduces turbulence around the boundary layer, and I think it actually stabilizes the ski. And I have a friend who works for Boeing, And he explained to me that planes actually, this is after the fact, this wasn't beforehand, that Boeing actually does something similar on their planes where, believe it or not, they're not completely smooth. They're intentionally textured in certain areas to kind of disrupt the boundary layer where those molecules kind of want to stick to the surface, and that little bit of turbulence knocks them off. And we used to say, and that reduces drag. I'm not sure if that's exactly true, if it reduces drag so much as it stabilizes the ski slightly. So, yeah, but I do know it's a benefit because we've done the A to B back-to-back testing, and I really notice it mostly like on that first opening pass when a lake is just like a mirror. Sometimes it gets a little spooky and skis kind of get sucked down to the water and weird stuff happens. The speed skin, that doesn't happen as much. So, yeah, it's a subtle design cue, 5% improvement in performance. You start to add all those little details up, and that can be a differentiator.
Yeah, for sure. In a sport where thousandths of a second and quarter buoys matter, that's kind of a
Yeah.
big deal. What about
Exactly.
David P asks, when was the first A1 released, or when was A1 first released, and could HO produce an anniversary production run?
Yeah, I think A1 was released in model year 2009. So that might have been the fall of 2008. I think those are the right dates. So yeah, actually, if we were to release a 10-year anniversary, it would be model year 19, which we have completed already. Unfortunately, we didn't choose to do a 10-year anniversary of that ski. We still have all the molds, and people still have like a really sweet spot in their heart for that ski. I don't, but and the only reason I say it is because we go back and ride the older skis, and just this spring, Will Asher, Benny Sadabauer, John Travers, and myself. I wasn't with them, but I did it independently. We went back and rode A1, and we rode A3, and I rode S2, and a couple other skis, just to kind of do our homework and make sure that we were doing the right stuff. We were going the right direction because you get feedback. Sometimes you're blowing it, right? So, and I remember such fond things of A1, but I was really amazed. It was very flat and it didn't turn extremely well, and I didn't think it necessarily held a lot of direction into the wakes. So it made me feel better about where we're going with our newer skis. But yes, I know there's a lot of people out there that really love that ski. But I'd say, hey, go back and ride it. You know what I mean? Go out and try it again and see if it still skis as well as you remember. I think at that era, that was definitely the ski to have. It was cutting edge and it was the best ski on the market. But I think, we've learned a lot through the last decade. And I'm happy with the direction we're going in that regard compared to Syndicate Pro versus an A1. So,
What about material science? Do you want to talk about that?
yeah, carbon. Horton had a question on weight versus.
Yeah, Horton had a question about, let's see if I can find it.
I think you know it. I can speak to it. I have a different take on this, and so this is an area where I'll be very honest. Like, my background is mechanical engineering and actually composites and material science, but I'm not claiming that I have the answer in this regard. And my thinking's kind of evolved through the years on this stuff, but and really not from a theory standpoint, but from an experimental testing standpoint. So, we've ridden skis that are made out of fiberglass and polyurethane, which is a very traditional construction, right? That's what skis used to be made out of. That's what surfboards are made out of. Well, obviously, everyone on this forum has probably ridden skis that have carbon fiber replacing the fiberglass, but still have that same polyurethane core. Then we've ridden carbon and PVC foam cores. PVC foam's a little bit higher end foam, lower density, higher mechanical properties. I've ridden multiple iterations of PVC brands and PVC replacements like PMI and things like that. We've ridden hollow skis. We've ridden wood cord skis. We've ridden every combination of PVC and wood stringers. And to be honest, through all that, I cannot feel how you get to the flex. I can just feel the resulting flex. So what I mean by that is if you have two skis that have different layups in terms of laminates and core materials, but they all have a similar flex, they feel very similar, other than potentially the weight of the ski when you carry it around, or maybe the weight of the ski when it kind of jumps through the wakes or something. But in terms of performance, acceleration, and all that, if two skis have the same flexion properties, both longitudinally and torsionally, I find it very hard as a skier, for myself personally, to feel the actual materials that are creating that resulting flex. So pretty kind of a little bit high level. So then people say, yeah, but then why are you using carbon? And I think carbon is just inherently a stiffer material at the kind of flex ranges that are occurring when we're actually skiing. So for instance, if we all have flex machines, and I don't know if you guys know exactly how flex machines work, but essentially you put a ski on there, and at HO we preload at 30 pounds, and then we deflect it 100 thousandths of an inch, and we record the amount of load required to deflect it that much. And you can have a fiberglass and a carbon ski both on that machine, and they might have a very similar number. But as you start to deflect those skis, 200 thou, 300 thou, 400 thou, 500 thou, then those curves, that stress strain curve, becomes very distinctly different between a carbon and a fiberglass ski. So that
talk about that. Just talk about. I mean, I feel like I don't know how many other ski companies do the brake testing that we do. You told me, what was it, the Freeride Evo, when you put the fiberglass Freeride Evo on the brake machine?
Yeah, it maxed out the machine, so it strained so much, or it deflected so much, the machine actually hit like its full range before it failed. Where carbon, for instance, is a much more brittle material, so carbon usually fails in compression on the top, and not a result of just essentially being overloaded, but just overstrained. And when I say strained, like, how do I put that in layman's terms? Like, bent too far, right? You know what I mean? So it fails in that regard. So, but it is very stiff for its weight. So, what my theory is that we prefer the carbon skis at the finish of the turn, not because it's a magical rebound property per se, but because essentially they're stiffer than a fiberglass ski in that area. So they're holding their shape torsionally, longitudinally, rocker line, thing like that, so they accelerate better, because a more curved surface in that area will have more drag than a stiffer, flatter surface. However, it's still theoretical at this point, and a lot of that's anecdotal. It's just like feelings I have, although we do have a dynamic flex tester, and I can prove that carbon ramps up stress strain wise in relationship to fiberglass. Which we don't know exactly is how much our ski's deflecting in real world use. I hate to admit that. We should know that. But we need a little bit better instrumentation to understand how much the ski's deflecting in the finish of the turn when Will Asher rides it. Now we are understanding how much load tension there is on the rope, but it'd be nice to translate that to ski. So that's my homework for the next year. And I think that can help a lot. And that kind of leads into one of the other questions. Is ski design stagnating? Is there potential for future skis? And I think it's in those areas. So material design is important, but not necessarily in the way people might think, mostly in the way of the resulting flexion properties, in my opinion. It doesn't have too much to do with weight, in my opinion.
Although people do tend to focus on weight to a certain degree.
Yeah, and I think that's relevant when your skis went from 7 or 8 pounds down to 4. But now the Syndicate Pro, I made a ski the other day for Benny, and it was, we measure the weight before the fin boxes go on. It was like 2 pounds, 8 ounces without the badge and all that. I think you're starting to potentially get diminishing returns at that point, I know Terry Winter and I used to talk about it, like if you had to choose between a 3-pound ski and a 4-pound ski, would you choose? And he's like, yeah, I'd take 4 all day long. And I'm kind of in his camp, but we do notice that when we put a 3-pound ski in the wall versus a 4-pound ski, the 3-pound skis sell better. So just because.
But that's human nature. You walk up to the shelf and you learn to develop this understanding that when you pick up a light ski, that's supposed to be premier.
Sure. Because it comes from bikes and it comes from golf clubs and things like that. But I would dare say, those are different equations with bikes. But golf clubs, they're really looking at the flexion properties just like we are.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
but bikes is different because you
got to go
powering
uphill.
It's human powered. Whereas although it's not that much different because we do still get pushed around by the water. So if you're 50 pounds heavier, it's going to take more. You're going to have to push more water to get across course. But
for sure,
within reason.
For sure.
So you answered a couple of threads.
I tried to answer a bunch there at once, yeah. Well, one last thing I would point out, not to elaborate this too long, is yeah, light skis are great, but to be honest, the boots the majority of people are putting on skis are not light. So, I mean, that has a huge effect. I mean, Syndicate Hardshell is a great boot, but it's not exactly the lightest boot out there. You know, like a HO X Max boot with a direct connect plate is very light, and so, you know, something to consider. Weight probably isn't reducing the weight isn't the future. Put it at 2 pound ski isn't going to make you necessarily run more buoys, but hey, that's great discussion for the thread because I'm sure some guys will prove me wrong.
What about Garn's question? He Syndicate hard shell front and HO chop top in the rear. We don't we don't have that anymore. What option would you recommend that HO provides for a rear
Yeah,
foot if somebody has a hard shell in the front and not a toe loop guy?
that's a great question. We've been struggling with this since we introduced the EXO. Like EXO was designed as a double boot system, but our high end skier didn't use double boots. So what are you going to do? So then I was like, well, we made kind of a no cuff rear boot that went on that system. And Will Asher actually skied in a no cuff rear boot for a whole season. I think if you look back 2009 or 10, especially the end of the year, he was riding that, and he had a lot of really good things to say about that. And so we kind of invented that. Although I think not many people remember that. And Reflex has come out with the R style in recent years and had a lot of success. And we went back and revisited that boot, and we kind of did a chop top version of that, essentially where it had no cuff, but it was a little bit softer, and the liner pulled out. And unfortunately, that didn't sell very well. So I introduced that, but we sell a lot of skis through the dealer network. That's kind of what we're based on, and the numbers, the orders were quite low, and it was difficult for the manufacturer to make. So we kind of moved away from that. So I was nervous I was going to leave a bit of a hole in the product line, but I really recommend two boot options, and this is really what I see on the market anyways. This is what people are actually using, so I think it makes the most sense. If you're a toe plate guy, it's a no-brainer. Syndicate Hardshell works great with the toe plate. That's what Will Asher uses. That's what John Travers uses actually now. If you're a double boot guy like me, I think the animal boot is the proven boot. You know, you want a relatively soft rubber or soft EVA rear boot, and that's just to have the proper release properties to work with the front hard shell. And also for a skiing standpoint, you just don't want overly supportive, stiff rear boot. Otherwise, you'll just kind of stand on your back foot and ski off of that. So I will kind of give you guys a sneak peek. Animal boot is being tweaked for next year, and it is going back to the classic 1998 construction, more or less. Has a full rubber overlay, does not have the laces. The EVA is a little bit softer. The footbed's new. It has kind of like a brushed EVA footbed, more similar to like the standard Wiley's footbed style. And that thing is really designed. The rear boot has a thinner rubber overlay than the front boot. That's something I've been using for years, running a softer rear boot, having a thinner overlay. So that rear boot is really specifically designed to work with the Syndicate hard shell. So if you can hold out to Water Ski Nationals 2019 or 2018, that would be great. And in the meantime, kickers and animal boots are essentially, that's what we recommend. So.
Yeah. Well, so just one more follow up. Brian Crease, B. Crease asked, I think that's how you say his last name. That's how I've been saying it. How far off in time are releases and shells from being, pretty much the same as the snow ski industry, as in regards to the technical innovation side?
Yeah. Well, it all depends. The market's quite small and the tooling investment's quite high. So my goal is to try and sell as many Syndicate hardshells as I can, and essentially take the money from that and apply it to next generation system. Kind of like the Tesla Elon Musk philosophy of like you build a roadster and then you dump it into a Model S, and you take the profits from Model S and you dump it into a Model 3, right? So I think we have the best ski on the market right now, or excuse me, the best boot on the market right now. So I'm very happy to promote that, but I definitely think there's room for improvements in terms of the shell being designed from the ground up for water skiing. I think there's some improvements to release mechanisms.
What is it, 5 years, 10 years? How long is it going to take to where we get to the point where we can look back and be like, wow, look at, we finally arrived where we wanted to arrive as far as hard shell technology?
it has to be under 5 years, otherwise I'm not really doing my job. The trick is to get the costing down to a more reasonable price point to allow it to become more mass market appeal. My vision would be, yeah, tournament skiing is great. That's our passion. That's the balustrade people. But if we really want to, what do they call it? Say disrupt the industry or make real change. I got to figure out how to get that hard shell down to, crossover boot pricing. I have some ideas. We've actually been working on this for a while. We have some cool binding and boot design ideas. It's just executing on them and getting the funding, the capital, the investment to spend $100,000 on injection molds for shells and things like that. So it's coming, and we're pushing hard into doing that, and not necessarily just from a business standpoint, because I don't think it really pencils on paper. Just from trying to bring water skiing back to the forefront or make a mark,
evolve the sport.
Change the game. Yeah, that's why I think a lot of us are motivated to be here. The opportunity to make change and to hopefully grow participation or be like, man, that boot changed the game.
Yeah.
So,
Bracemaker. We got a couple more and then we'll sign off. Bracemaker asks,
Sure.
What do ski companies wish we as skiers would do to grow the sport?
It's a hard question. I mean, just off topic, I was thinking product and things like that. Immediately the thing that comes to mind is, myself, I'm guilty of this too. I grew up in Michigan. My parents were teachers. We lived on a public lake, and we just water skied in the mornings and the evenings. And then slowly through my kind of obsession with tournament water skiing, we drifted away from the public waterways and kind of got more involved in the private ski lake, which was great for, being a competitor and improving my skiing skills. But the negative was, my case, maybe I wasn't on the public waterway, inspiring that next generation of skiers to want to get out there and ski. That's what happened to me. My neighbor, Kip Knight, was a water skier on the Michigan State water ski team, and after dinner every day, he'd go out and free ski or slalom right in front of my house, and this dude ripped. I mean, realistically, I think he was running 22 off, but to me, he was the best skier in the world, right? So I wanted to be like him. I was like, dude, that's the coolest thing in the world, and that's what got me started on the path. But then as soon as when we go to the private ski lakes, we're no longer out there free skiing after dinner, inspiring that little kid on the dock to want to be a water skier. So maybe get out there on the public waterways, or if you're not able to do that, invite that little kid at the end of the dock to your private ski lake and take him skiing. Because we kind of have a little bit of a golf course country club mentality, whether we want to admit it or not, and I think really, Marcus, what you're kind of doing with the free ride thing, and what we're trying to do is make new free ride skis, is just to make getting out and skiing on the public waterways behind whatever type of boat you have more accessible and cool. Make it cool, man. Like Marcus is out there ripping at 26 miles an hour with his dreads flying on Lake Powell. That's something that will inspire kids to get out there and ski, and whether they want to become tournament skiers or not is irrelevant. They're water ski participants. They are getting out in the water and enjoying themselves. So I guess that's off the top of my head. I mean, if you want me to get... Yeah, exactly.
Do you want to tackle one more? We've got one more, I think.
I'll keep going. I don't want everyone to get bored. We've skipped a lot.
So. Well, we actually covered almost everything. I just don't want you to run out of hard drive space as you're recording.
Oh, yeah.
No, I mean, anything else you want to talk about before I find this last one or two questions?
Was there one on... I remember one vaguely on A1 with the...
Oh, you want to talk about the pontoons?
Bottom?
You want to talk about the... Can you comment on why those bevels used in the A1 went away?
Yeah, I think that's a cool story, really.
Seems like, Jar says, seems like I picked up a really old 80s learning ski and it had those same wide flat spot bevels on both sides.
Yeah, so those are tunnel bottoms back in the day. They were really wide, and then A1, I think we, from a marketing standpoint, called it like a hybrid concave. But in essence, it was kind of like a tunnel in the front and edge to edge in the back. And the reason we got onto that kick is because we had a Monza at the time, which myself and Bob, we weren't really involved in the design of that. That was kind of the crew who was at HO previously. It was a great, it was a good ski. Right, so some of the feedback on that ski was, and I rode it for a lot of years, was it It was a little bit flighty, or what we used to say, kind of felt like you're in black ice. You're on black ice, kind of into the offside turn. Didn't have a lot of like grip, and that's what Parrish was experiencing. Willie had become accustomed to it, so he could make it work. But anyway, what we did, and Parrish had come from a Sixum, and a Sixum kind of had those kind of tunnel in the front, and so immediately Bob, his master handwork, he kind of grafted into kind of rails in the forebody of our Monzas. And immediately what we noticed was that we had a lot more grip. We had a lot more suction. We had a lot more stability. That feeling of kind of being on black ice into the offside essentially disappeared, and the offside turn improved quite a bit. And we thought, hey, Parrish is really going to like this. I really personally liked it. We didn't think Will would like that because, he was winning the world championships on a Monza, but he actually really liked it as well. So we knew, hey, we're onto something here. That was the extent of it, though, believe it or not. I mean, we just knew it was better. Ran buoys, experimentally tested better. Years later, looking back on it, we were starting to question, well, why did that work so well? And, the Monza had a relatively, looking back, shallow concave. It was about 330 thousandths of an inch deep, which is pretty narrow, pretty shallow. Shallow concaves typically feel lighter on the water. They're a little bit flightier. They ride higher. By putting the rails in there, in essence, you're not making the concave deeper, but because you're moving inward, let's say half an inch on each side, and you still have the same depth, you're making the concave steeper. And that steepness or rate of change of the concave is what is giving it that grip or that feeling of suction or the stability and that improved offside turn. So because we were working with skis that were already made out of molds and modifying by hand, that was a good solution to the problem. But from an engineering standpoint, was that really the optimal combination of variables? And once we had the data, we no longer had to take a physical ski and hand modify it. We could start in the theoretical CAD space and design whatever variable we wanted. We started to understand that, hey, we don't necessarily need the rail to get the steepness. We can just put the steepness in an edge-to-edge concave, and the resulting concave depth will be more like 390 thou or 400 thou, but we'll have an equivalent steepness, and that's why we moved away from the rail. It wasn't necessarily that the rail was bad. The rail was a very good solution to when you were doing handwork on skis, but once you move beyond handwork into the true like theoretical CAD space, as an engineer, could we find a better combination of variables? And yes, we did. We had the steepness without the rail, and so we had the grip we were looking for on the offside, but we still had the rail. It made the ski like not want to necessarily like turn back left at one ball or like kind of rotate in the yaw plane. It kind of took some of that direction change out of the ski, so we could combine the direction change of an edge to edge with the steepness of a tunnel bottom and kind of get a better combination. That's what you see like on Syndicate Pro and the newer skis. So cool question, like very kind of transparent answer. Like we're learning as we go, and we think we found a better combination.
No, it's great. I think that's the history. That's what I want to hear when I'm learning about something I care about.
Yeah.
I got two more.
Sure.
Liquid Skier. The Liquid Skier asks about a ski for his dad. Spends most of his time in the course. Consistently running 22 off at 34, but he's struggling at 28 off. I'm looking at a Carbon Omni or a Syndicate Omni and wondering what you think, because he's trying to get him off of his trusty Conley F1, but he hasn't skied the Omni shape, so he's a little worried it might be too different.
Omni shape would be great for him. Omni is one of the newer skis we've made. It's a little bit wider than a tournament ski, but it's not a full-blown wide ride ski. It's based off of kind of a Syndicate Pro up in the front in terms of like bevels and concave depths and rocker lines, but it does have the clean edge in the tail. And I think that's really the magic for that line length that he's at. If he's running 22 at 34 and he wants to start to run 28 and 32, I really believe there's no better ski in the world for running 22s and 28s and 32s than Omni. I mean, for me, I can run 32 off at 34 miles an hour better on an Omni than I can on a Syndicate Pro. It's just less physical effort. The thing just accelerates. You can move better. You don't have to use muscle. You can kind of just like move your center of mass. It accelerates so well off the buoy. It has enough glide to carry out to buoy width. So like, that's the perfect ski. Now the construction, I mean, it really depends. I mean, both of them are great constructions. The main differentiation is the core material. The PVC foam is obviously lighter, and that resulting ski, like we talked about, is stiffer because it has higher mechanical properties of the foam. So this Syndicate Omni, so it'll be a little faster accelerating at the finish of the turn, and it'll be a little bit lighter when you carry it down to the dock. But either one, you can't go wrong. But so Omni shape and then either construction. I mean, personally, I like the Syndicate construction. That's what I'm used to, and I like a little bit stiffer flex. And so, I mean, if money's no objective, then I'd recommend that one because that's the better of the two in terms of performance. But either one at 28 off will be a great ski.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's tackle one more. This might be a little bit more of a difficult one. Not difficult, but I mean it's a technical question about scaling and design sizes.
I know Sam wanted me to talk about this one. So
Lake HO26. Been told by many that ski companies will design the midweight ski, such as a 66 or 7, and 65 and 8 don't have the design time. Instead, they just scale the ski to size. Is there any truth to that, and kind of maybe expound on that a little bit, how we do it at HO and maybe how it's been done in the past?
Yeah, sure. Well, at HO, we have tried everything in scaling, to be honest. I think like the first 10 models of skis we did, we almost scaled each one differently. I don't know if I should admit that, but we were searching for the best way to scale. When I started, things were when I inherited HO, more or less, things were proportionally scaled in X, Y, and Z axes. So what that means is if you had a 66-inch ski and you wanted to make a 65-inch ski, then essentially you just go 65 divided by 66, which is about 98.5%, or about 1.5% less, and then you just apply that percentage to all the variables. So if you apply that to the width, for instance, say you're 6.8 inches wide, then the 65 would be like 103 thou less. So it'd be just a little bit under 6.7 inches wide. And you do that for thickness and bevel size and rocker length. It was just, and in the end, what you got was kind of like when you were a kid, you had those Russian dolls where you had the doll and then you had the doll inside of that and the doll inside of that. It was kind of like like a layer, like shells. It's M&Ms, right? You got the candy coating. That's essentially what you have. Bob LaPointe, once again, you can see Bob's influence. He's like, yeah, that doesn't work. He's like, that doesn't work when you scale up to a 68. And Bob knew because he was run 39 on 68-inch skis. And his theory was, well, you need to disproportionately make the tail wider. So in essence, when you're heavier, the ski doesn't just drop down in the water like this. It drops down in the water like the back drops lower, right? So when we did A1, we built a 66.25, and then we did a 67.5 next. But no, excuse me, other way around. 67.5 first, and 66.25, and then we did the big one. But anyway, when we built each size individually, so my engineers that worked with us at the time, they had to start over and rebuild the ski for every size, and that was a big headache. But and we did disproportionate scales. And I think in the end, it was better, but I don't think Bob was still satisfied. So through the years, we did a lot of non-proportional scaling where we would scale X and Y and not Z. We went back to more rebuilding. We did essentially where we just like split a ski down the center line and bumped the whole thing out, let's say 100 thou, and put it back together. We tried those. But in the end, kind of what we've settled on is, that seems to work very well, is what we call width-based scaling. So in essence, instead of doing that equation where I say 65 divided by 66 and getting a certain percentage, and that percentage comes out to about 100 thou size difference between sizes. We're more down the 60 to 80 thousandth width change between sizes. So that does not equate to a full inch in length. And we seem to feel like those smaller incremental gaps feel better on the water than the 100 thou gaps you get with traditional length-based scaling. And I can explain that to people thinking like, I can ride a 65, a 66, or a 67, depending on the rocker line and where the boots are located. That's just ski tip out in the air. But I know personally, I can't ride a ski that's 6.9 inches wide. It's just too wide. It doesn't roll into the turn. It doesn't gain angle into the wakes. It's got too much of a riding moment. So we're very sensitive to width changes. We're necessarily, depending on binding location and rocker lines, we're not as susceptible to length changes. Like you can cut 2 inches off the tip of a 67, it still skis the same. But if you add 100 thou to the max width, or even 40 thou to the 3-inch tail width, it can feel drastically different. So HO feels like we should try and constrain the most important variable, which is the width. And to the point, yes, we do typically start on 66 or 67 just because those are the sizes of skis that we ride. And then we do use this new width-based scaling to go up and down from there. But we make sure, like back to the experimental testing phase, that we don't just scale and go to market. I mean, that we actually, get them out there to the people who are the proper. And it makes no sense for me to ride a 68. I've also learned that. Like, that's ridiculous. Bob needs to ride a 68. Jamie Boulder needs to ride the 65. I'm pretty good at riding a 66. John Travers and Nick Adams can ride a 67. So our test team is diversified to make sure we're covering the proper sizes. So.
Awesome. Yeah. That's good. I don't really. We're over an hour and 10 minutes in, so it might be too long. Yeah, we could be done. I mean, we've answered.
I think we should be done because we don't want to bore everybody. They want to have a next month with you or Bob.
I don't know if I'm ready for that, but man, this is good. I think we've almost covered. Cool. If we left anybody out, I'm sorry, Dave's sorry, but we did try to. We did try to touch on almost every question on this thread, and we're stoked to have this many questions. I don't know how many posts there have been, but there's a lot, so stoked.
Yeah, that was cool. Thank you, guys. I enjoy actually talking about that stuff quite a bit. Kind of give you the behind-the-scenes look and hopefully show how much passion and energy we're trying to put in it to make best product. And that's really our goal.
We did miss one, the computational flow dynamics in ski design.
We do not use computational flow dynamics.
I know.
I wish.
I know.
I wish.
I mean,
we need some of the aerospace budget. And then, to be honest, I don't know enough about it to even know if it'd be applicable. I do know, I'll tell one last story, that years ago, I got contacted by a naval architect. He had done some stuff for the Navy, obviously. I think he might have done some Boeing work, too. And he had said, hey, I got this ski design. This thing is unbelievable. I've run it through the computers at whatever, the Naval Architect Institute, or this is it. I said, cool, man, send it to me. And I got it. It was radically different. It had these flute things that went through the bevels. I mean, it looked sick. He had made a mold. It was all made out of carbon. I mean, it was impressive. And I went out and rode it, and it was the worst ski I've ever ridden. It was unskiable. In a straight line, it was ventilating and rised up, and it was so low drag. But the minute you try to roll it over, it was unpredictable. It didn't want to turn. So what I learned right then and there is having some, supercomputers, optimizing boat hull designs is great for going in a straight line. But man, the demands that we want from a water ski in terms of we want it to be low drag, we want it to track, we want it to release, we want the front to engage and the back to do this. I don't know if there's a computer out there that could even model that for us. But, there's probably some guys on the forum that knows a lot more about this than I. A lot of our stuff is theoretical conceptual design and engineering, then applied to experimental testing, and then the iterative process of that plan, do, check, adjust, is going round and round until we feel like we have something that's better than what we had before. So we've got 2 pretty cool new radical ski designs coming out and a whole bunch of other products. So I'll be excited to show those off at the Water Ski Nationals, and just hopefully to get out there and see all you guys on the lake. So that's it. Yep. Cool. Yeah, thank you guys. I'll talk to you later. All right.